Welcome to the channel, we're so glad you're here. Before we dive into today's story, take a moment to let us know where you're watching from. Drop a comment below. We love hearing from you all around the world. If you enjoy captivating tales like this one, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss out. We've got a brand new story coming your way tomorrow, and trust me, you won't want to miss it. So, sit back, relax, and let's get started with today's adventure. Can money buy respect? Watch what happens when a rich man tests a royal guard. Ethan had always been used to getting what he wanted. At 27, he was the heir to a vast U.S. tech fortune, a life of luxury that few could even imagine. For Ethan, money was never an obstacle. It was a tool, a powerful weapon that bent the world to his will. He had grown up in a world where wealth opened every door, erased every inconvenience, and gave him the power to sidestep any form of authority. On this particular day, Ethan drove his sleek black Aston Martin up to the White House gates, the engine roaring as it screeched to a halt. The sound was sharp, cutting through the usual calm around the presidential residence. As the car came to a stop, tourists looked up, some frowning at the disruption. But Ethan didn't notice. In fact, he didn't care. To him, it was just another moment where the rules didn't apply to him. He slammed the car door with a sense of finality, tossing his keys casually to a parking attendant nearby. "Try not to scratch it," Ethan called out with a smirk, his voice dripping with arrogance. "But if you do, Daddy will just buy me another." He didn't even wait for the attendant to respond. The young man's blank expression said it all. This wasn't the first time someone had treated him this way. Ethan was used to money being the great equalizer, a magic card that worked every time. As Ethan walked towards the gates of the White House, he didn't even glance at the line of waiting tourists. With his designer sunglasses perched on his perfectly styled hair, he strutted past the waiting crowd like someone who owned the place. He knocked into a child holding an ice cream cone. The cone tipped, spilling its contents onto the ground. Without breaking his stride, Ethan dropped a $20 bill near the child's feet. "Buy another one," he said dismissively, offering no apology, no remorse. His patience was thin. Time was money, after all. His impatience grew with each passing. The line was too slow and the people too many. He wasn't used to waiting. Ethan slipped a $50 bill into the pocket of a tour guide, making sure to get a better position in line. The guide smiled weakly, as if this was a normal occurrence. He was just another person who could be bought. Next, Ethan pushed past an elderly couple, not even acknowledging their protests. "Do you know who my father is?" he asked the elderly man, his tone sharp and condescending. Before the man could even reply, Ethan had already walked away, leaving a crumpled $10 bill in the man's pocket as a pathetic attempt at an apology. To Ethan, this was nothing more than a transaction, a way to grease the wheels of the world. But it was at that moment, as Ethan approached the ceremonial guard stationed outside the White House, that he saw someone who didn't bend, someone who didn't acknowledge him or anyone else for that matter. Standing tall and still like a statue was Sergeant Alex Grant, a U.S. soldier dressed in his red uniform and black bearskin hat. To Ethan, it was both curious and infuriating. Here was a man who didn't care about money, who didn't recognize his power, his wealth, or his name. Alex Grant had been standing at attention for hours, his mind disciplined, his focus unbroken. The heat of the day bore down on him, but he didn't flinch. His position was more than just a job. It was a commitment to tradition, to duty. He had served in Afghanistan, facing true danger, and now he stood in front of the White House maintaining his composure as he had done countless times before. He had been reassigned to ceremonial duty after a controversial incident, but it didn't matter to him. Duty was duty. His personal pride and professionalism meant more than any money or fame. Ethan, however, wasn't impressed. He circled the guard, waving his hand in front of Alex's face, trying to get a reaction, trying to break through the barrier of discipline. "Hello? Anyone home?" he called out mockingly, his upper-class accent dripping with entitlement. When Alex's expression remained unchanged, Ethan's lips curled into a smile, one that didn't reach his eyes. Ethan was used to control, to bending people to his will with money. So he decided to test the boundaries of the guard's discipline. He took out a $20 bill, waving it just in front of Alex's face. "Let's see how good you really are," he murmured. "I've always wondered, what's the going rate for making one of you toy soldiers smile?" The guard remained still. His eyes didn't shift, his posture didn't change. To Ethan, this only made him more determined. "Is this enough?" he asked, replacing the $20 with a $50 bill. "Or are you holding out for more?" The money was now hovering in front of Alex's face, taunting him. Ethan's provocation grew bolder with every second. He increased the money, raised the stakes. $100, $200. Nothing seemed to break Alex's concentration. But Ethan wasn't, used to being ignored. This man, this guard, was just another part of the world that Ethan believed could be bought, and he was determined to prove it. But what Ethan didn't know was that discipline wasn't a weakness. And what he didn't understand was that beneath Alex's calm exterior, there was a soldier who had seen and experienced more than Ethan could ever imagine. A soldier who, while standing still, was always prepared to act when the moment called. For it, Ethan continued to circle around Alex, who stood motionless, unwavering in his discipline. It was like the guard didn't even notice him, and that only pushed Ethan further into his irritation. This man, this soldier, wasn't following the script. Ethan was used to people bending, used to getting what he wanted. But here was someone who wasn't buying into his wealth, his power, or his privilege. The crowd around them was starting to notice Ethan's increasingly obnoxious behavior. People stopped talking, their attention turning toward the drama unfolding before them. A few exchanged awkward glances, unsure of how to react. Ethan thrived on this attention, the feeling of all eyes on him, and the realization that he was the center of attention made him more determined. "You really think you can just stand there like a robot, don't you?" Ethan's voice was louder now, cutting through the air like a blade. He took out another $50 bill, waving it right under Alex's nose. "What's it gonna take, huh? A little smile? A wink? Or are you just too stiff to even move?" But Alex didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. He remained still, unmoved by the taunts, unmoved by the money, and most importantly, unmoved by Ethan's challenge. Ethan's frustration grew. This wasn't just about a smile anymore. This was about winning, about proving that no one was above him. The game had escalated, and now it wasn't just about bending someone to his will. It was about breaking them, getting them to acknowledge his superiority. "I'll tell you what," Ethan said, voice dripping with malice. "I'll pay you $200. All I want is a word. Just one word. Come on, man, surely you've got something to say for yourself." Still nothing. Alex didn't even look at him. The silence was suffocating, but Ethan couldn't stop himself now. He was too deep into this to back off. The crowd had started to murmur. Some were uncomfortable, while others watched with bated breath, unsure if they were witnessing something special or something truly distasteful. Ethan didn't care. He was too wrapped up in his own show to notice the growing unease around him. $200. "Alex," Ethan sneered. "I bet that's more than your entire salary. Don't you want it? Come on, just smile, say something, anything." The insult was sharper now, and the provocation more pointed. Ethan was playing with fire, and he knew it. But in his mind, this was just another transaction. The kind of transaction that he was sure he could win with enough cash on the table. But as he stepped closer, pushing the money directly in front of Alex's face, something shifted. For a split second, Alex's eyes flickered, just the tiniest change, so small that only someone who had been through the rigors of battle would notice it. Ethan didn't see it. He was too focused on his next move. "Here's $500, he said, his tone now mocking and venomous. He held up the money for everyone to see, fanning the bills out like a fan of cards. $500 for one smile, one word. Think of it as your reward for playing along with the show. You deserve it, right? You've earned it, standing there all day. What's $500 to a man like you? The crowd had gone silent now, some people moving away, others exchanging worried glances. The veteran in the crowd, a man who had clearly seen more than his share of military discipline, stepped forward, his brow furrowing with concern. He could see the subtle signs, the tension in Alex's jaw, the way his fingers gripped his rifle. Just a little tighter. Ethan was crossing a line, and Alex's restraint was being tested like never before. $500, Robert, Ethan taunted, using the name he had assumed for the guard. What's your price? Surely everyone has a price, even you. The veteran moved closer, his gaze shifting between Ethan and the unmoving guard. That's enough, the veteran said, his voice firm and commanding. Back off. Show some respect. But Ethan, still caught in his ego and entitlement, wasn't ready to back down. His gaze locked with Alex's, a silent challenge in the air between them. Respect? What's there to respect? Ethan spat. This is all just a game, a performance. You're not protecting anything real, just a statue, a prop for tourists. This is all just a show, and I'm the one who's going to make it interesting. And with that, Ethan pushed even further. He reached into his wallet, pulling out a thick stack of $1,000 bills. Here, he said, I'll make it easy. $1,000, just a word, just one moment of weakness and it's yours. He shoved the money into Alex's face, pressing it harder, testing every boundary of space and decency. Alex's jaw tightened, but he didn't break. He didn't move. But for the first time, the pressure was mounting, and there was a shift in his eyes. Not enough for the crowd to notice, but for the veteran who stood nearby, it was unmistakable. Ethan was poking the wrong bear, and Alex wasn't a man who would let this go on forever. And then, the moment that would change everything happened. DC. Tension between Ethan and Alex had reached a boiling point. Ethan, still fueled by the need to prove himself superior, stood inches away from the guard, shoving money in his face like it was the answer to everything. The crowd was holding its breath, some beginning to move back, sensing the situation, was teetering on the edge. Others, however, couldn't look away, drawn to the drama unfolding before them. Ethan had crossed the line, but he was too deep into his game now. There was no turning back. $1,000, Ethan said again, his voice sharp, taunting. One word, Alex, that's all I'm asking. What's it gonna be? You're gonna turn down $1,000? You really think you're better than that? Alex didn't blink. His posture remained perfect, his eyes locked on the horizon, unwavering. But beneath that still surface, the pressure was mounting. He had been pushed beyond reason, tested in ways no one should have to endure. Yet he held his ground, drawing on years of military training to suppress the boiling anger inside him. Ethan's voice grew louder, more desperate. This is a joke to you, right? You think you're some kind of hero standing there all day, doing nothing but looking pretty? This is just a stupid costume. You're not a soldier, you're a decoration. A statue, nothing more. He shoved the money closer to Alex's face, practically smothering him with it. Alex's muscles tightened. For a brief moment, his mind flickered back to the days in Afghanistan, where life and death hung in the balance, where decisions had to be made in the blink of an eye. He had fought through the heat, the exhaustion, the pain. He had faced far worse than this arrogant young man. And yet, in this moment, he couldn't allow himself to be broken. His training had taught him to endure far more than a few insults. Ethan wasn't finished. His words dripped with venom as he continued to taunt Alex, hoping to break him, to make him crack. You know, my dad always says dignity is just a commodity, something to be bought and sold. And right now, I'm offering you a price. I'm offering you everything. $1,000 for one word, one reaction. And you're just going to stand there like a fool. There it was, the final push. Ethan had gone too far. The money wasn't enough anymore, and neither was the challenge. Now it was personal, and Alex knew it. The tension in the air was palpable, suffocating, as if the world itself was waiting for something to happen. The crowd was getting restless. Some people were starting to murmur, whispering amongst themselves, sensing that Ethan was walking a dangerous line. The veteran, who had been watching closely, stepped forward again. His weathered face showed the faintest trace of disapproval, but there was a new urgency in his step. He could see the signs, the way Alex was reacting, the shift in his stance. The soldier wasn't just standing still anymore. He was preparing to do something. Ethan, still oblivious to the impending storm, pressed harder. He reached into his wallet and pulled out more money, fanning the bills out in front of Alex's face. $2,000. Just say one word. Tell me I've won. That's all it takes. You'll get the money and I'll get the satisfaction. You'll be nothing but a joke to me. But then something changed. A slight twitch of Alex's jaw, a tightening of his grip on his rifle, the tiniest shift in his eyes. It was subtle, barely, noticeable to anyone but the veteran. But in that moment, Ethan realized that he had made a mistake. This wasn't just a game anymore. He had pushed too far. Alex's hand shot out with lightning speed, grabbing Ethan's wrist with an iron grip. The force was so sudden that Ethan didn't even have time to react. His breath hitched as Alex twisted his arm in a flawless, precise motion. The next thing Ethan knew, he was being driven to the ground, his knees buckling under the weight of the soldier's grip. The money scattered from his hands, fluttering to the ground like confetti, the bills now worthless, a symbol of his own humiliation. "What the?" Ethan gasped, his mind racing as he tried to comprehend what had just happened. But before he could finish his sentence, his back hit the ground with a thud. The air was knocked out of him, and for a brief moment, he couldn't breathe. Alex's face remained calm, unmoved by Ethan's shock. He still held Ethan's wrist in a vice-like grip, his movements deliberate, almost surgical. The soldier's experience in combat had prepared him for this exact moment, the ability to remain calm, to execute control without losing focus. As Ethan struggled beneath him, Alex's voice cut through the tension like a blade. $2,000, Alex said quietly, holding up the scattered bills in front of Ethan's wide eyes. An impressive sum, but not nearly enough to buy what you were trying to purchase. Ethan stared at the money in disbelief, but before he could respond, Alex continued, his words like ice. "You're mistaken, Ethan. You don't get to buy respect, and you don't get to buy me. You've just learned a very valuable lesson." Ethan tried to speak, but Alex applied more pressure, silencing him instantly. The words stuck in Ethan's throat as he realized the weight of what had just happened. The control had shifted, and in that moment, Ethan was the one who was powerless. The scene was utterly surreal. Ethan, now pinned to the ground, could hardly process the chaos unfolding around him. His chest heaved with shock, and his mind raced to make sense of the situation. His arrogance, his entitlement, it all seemed so small now. The $1,000 bills he had so carelessly flaunted were scattered around him, their value now utterly meaningless. The crowd had gone silent, their collective breath held as they witnessed the moment that would forever shift the balance of power. Alex Grant stood over him, his posture straight, his face as stoic as ever. There was no satisfaction in his eyes, no pride in his victory. Just the cold, unwavering professionalism of a soldier who had seen far worse than a spoiled young man's tantrum. But beneath the surface there was something else, something far deeper. "You don't get to disrespect me," Alex said, his voice low and steady, carrying the weight of someone who had endured much more than Ethan could ever fathom. The crowd, still tense, watched with rapt attention, unsure whether to intervene or simply let the spectacle unfold. The older veteran, who had been observing from the sidelines, now stood a little closer, his eyes filled with approval. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest, a mixture of humiliation and disbelief coursing through him. This wasn't supposed to happen. He was supposed to be the one in control. He was supposed to win. But instead he found himself pinned to the ground by a man he had underestimated, someone who had no need for money or validation. "I think it's time you learned something," Alex continued, his grip on Ethan's wrist unwavering. "You think money can solve everything, that you can buy respect, buy people, but you're wrong." Alex's gaze hardened as he looked down at Ethan, his voice carrying the weight of every hard-earned lesson from years of service. Some things can't be bought, not by you, not by anyone. Ethan, still struggling to regain his breath, tried to pull away, but Alex's grip only tightened, pushing him deeper into the pavement. His vision blurred with humiliation as the reality of what was happening sank in. He had always been the one who made people bow to him, made them do his bidding with nothing but a few bills. But now, he was at the mercy of someone who didn't give a damn about his money. The crowd, which had once been drawn in by Ethan's display of wealth and bravado, now murmured among themselves, their discomfort turning into something else: respect. Alex's calm, measured response was everything Ethan wasn't. Where Ethan had used his wealth to manipulate and control, Alex had used discipline, strength, and honor. The contrast was stark, and for the first time, Ethan realized just how small his world really was. "I've been shot at by men who didn't have half the discipline you lack," Alex continued, his voice growing sharper with every word. "I've endured worse than your petty insults. You have no idea what it's like to be tested the way I have." Ethan could feel the weight of Alex's words, but his pride refused to let him fully absorb the lesson. Alex's hand remained firm on his wrist, but there was no anger in his eyes, no fury, just an unsettling calm. He wasn't some mindless robot as Ethan had assumed. He was a man who had been through hell and back, and it showed in every controlled breath, every calculated movement. "You think you can just buy people like they're objects?" Alex muttered. "But you've underestimated me, and you've underestimated what it means to stand for something." Ethan tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. His usual smooth tongue, the one that could talk its way out of any situation, failed him now. Instead, he choked on the realization that he had been outmatched, not by money, not by power, but by someone who had earned his place through hard work, honor, and sacrifice. Alex slowly began to loosen his grip, but not entirely. He wasn't letting Ethan off that easily. Not yet. "Here's your lesson," Alex said, his tone cold and firm. "You don't get to disrespect me or anyone else. Not like that." With a final deliberate motion, Alex pushed the crumpled bills that Ethan had once tried to stuff into his uniform into the young man's face. "You want to know what entitlement feels like?" he asked quietly, his eyes locking onto Ethan's. "Taste it." The money pressed against Ethan's lips, his own money. The currency he had used to try and break someone who had stood firm for far longer than he ever could. And in that moment, as he choked on his own actions, Ethan understood something he never had before. The power he thought he wielded was nothing compared to the strength of discipline, respect, and self-control. And as he tasted the bitter humiliation of having his own money shoved back at him, he realized that some lessons in life were far too valuable to be bought. The crowd was still, watching as Alex stood over Ethan, his grip on the young man's wrist unwavering. The tension in the air was thick, a strange mix of discomfort, disbelief, and a dawning sense of respect. Ethan's arrogance had been shattered, and now he lay on the cold pavement, his pride bruised beyond recognition. His chest heaved, trying to regain composure, but it was clear that the humiliation was far from over. Alex stood tall, looking down at Ethan with a mix of patience and restraint. He wasn't angry, no. That was the most unsettling part. He was calm, composed, as if this was just another moment of his duty, another test of his strength, his character. And in a way, it was. Alex had been in situations far worse than this, dangerous situations, life and death decisions in the heat of battle. This, however, was a different kind of test, a test of character, of self-control, and he was passing it with flying colors. "You think this is funny?" Ethan spat, his voice thick with humiliation and anger. His pride, though wounded, was still trying to claw its way back. "You think you've won?" Alex didn't answer immediately. He stood there for a moment, looking down at Ethan, his eyes steady, unflinching. It was as if Ethan's words were mere noise, insignificant compared to the weight of what had just transpired. Slowly, Alex reached down, picked up the scattered bills from the ground, and held them out in front of Ethan's face. "Here," Alex said, his voice cold and steady. "You wanted to buy respect, you wanted to buy a reaction, but you can't buy what you've lost today." Ethan blinked, his face turning red with rage and humiliation as Alex placed the money in his hands. For a brief moment, Ethan couldn't understand what was happening. The money he had flaunted, the currency he thought would make him the victor, was now being handed back to him, a bitter reminder of how far he had fallen. "This is what you thought would work," Alex continued, his tone softening ever so slightly. "But respect isn't something you can buy. Not with money, not with power, not with anything you've got." Ethan was silent now, his mind struggling to process the shift that had just occurred. The loud, arrogant young man had been humbled by a soldier, a man who had spent years on the front lines, who had faced true danger, who had earned every ounce of his discipline. Alex's words echoed in his head, the meaning sinking in deeper than he cared to admit. "You don't even know what it means to stand for something, do you?" Alex added, kneeling down slightly to meet Ethan's eyes. "You think everything's for sale, but sometimes the most valuable things are the ones you can't buy." Ethan wanted to speak, wanted to lash out, but the words stuck in his throat. He had been bested, not by money, not by status, but by the very thing he had overlooked his entire life: integrity. The crowd, still holding its collective breath, began to murmur. Some were in awe, some in disbelief, but no one dared to interfere. Alex was in control now, and everyone knew it. His composure was the only thing that mattered, and in that moment it shone brighter than any wealth or power Ethan could muster. Alex's gaze shifted to the veteran standing at the edge of the crowd. The older man had been watching the entire exchange, and now his face was filled with a quiet approval. He nodded once as if to say, "Well done." Ethan's eyes darted between the money in his hands and Alex, realizing that he had underestimated this man in every way. "Who are you?" he finally croaked, his voice barely audible. "I'm someone who's earned the right to stand where I am," Alex replied calmly. "I've earned my respect, and I don't need your money to prove it." Ethan could only stare at him, the weight of his own arrogance pressing down on him like a heavy weight. It was too much to process, too much to accept. Everything he had known about power, about control, had just been dismantled in front of him. And the worst part? He knew it was his own doing. Alex finally released his grip on Ethan's wrist, but he didn't move away. He stayed there, standing, tall, as if waiting for Ethan to get up on his own. The message was clear. Alex wasn't going to help him back to his feet. Ethan had to do that for himself. And in that moment, he realized just how far he had fallen. The crowd began to disperse, some shaking their heads, others whispering quietly amongst themselves. But no one said anything out loud. They didn't need to. The lesson had been learned, not just by Ethan, but by everyone who had witnessed this moment. Respect couldn't be bought. It had to be earned. Ethan sat there for a long moment, the weight of his humiliation settling in. The $2,000 that had once seemed like a small price to pay for someone's dignity now seemed like nothing more than paper. Worthless. It had never been about the money. It had always been about something far greater. And now Ethan was left to figure out how to rebuild the thing he had lost: his respect. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this story. What did you think of Ethan's actions and the way Alex responded? Do you believe that respect can truly be bought, or is it something that must be earned? It's clear that Ethan's world of entitlement and privilege was shattered in this moment, but do you think he'll ever learn from it? And what about Alex? Do you think he handled the situation the right way? Was there another way he could have responded? In today's world, we often see people trying to buy their way into power, influence, or respect. But this story shows us that some things can't be purchased. What's your take on the value of discipline and self-control versus wealth and privilege? We want to hear your thoughts and experiences. Have you ever been in a situation where money or power didn't get you what you expected? Or perhaps you've had a moment where you've seen someone stand firm in their values and discipline, like Alex did in this story. Let us know in the comments below. We love engaging with our community and learning from your perspectives. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. And be sure to hit the bell so you never miss out on our latest content. We can't wait to hear from you.